Ever feel like just keeping up with the latest news and research requires like a full-on science degree? We get it. That's kind of why we do this whole thing.
Yeah.
Break it all down. And today we are diving deep into something I think we can all relate to, plastic bottles. Yeah, those super convenient things we grab on the go. Turns out there might be a connection between drinking from them and our blood pressure.
You got it. That's exactly what we're going to dig into. We're looking at some pretty recent research, actually, specifically an article on earth.com that really dives into this. How is all the plastic we use every single day impacting our health? What does it mean for us and the choices we make?
Okay, so let's unpack this. I mean, plastic is everywhere, right? It's kind of unavoidable in a lot of ways. But more and more research is really starting to look deeper. Like, it's not just about plastic and the environment anymore, but how it affects our bodies. And with all this talk about microplastics, it really makes you wonder if something as simple as grabbing a quick water bottle could actually be risky in ways we don't even realize.
It's a great question, and one we're only beginning to understand, really. And that focus on microplastics is key here. Like, we're talking tiny fragments, less than 5 millimeters, often invisible to the naked eye. They come from the breakdown of bigger plastic items, sure, but also from things you might not expect, like car tires wearing down, or even the clothes we wear, if they're made with synthetic fabrics.
Wow, I don't think people realize how much plastic is in our clothes these days. But 5 millimeters, that's tiny.
Right. It's almost hard to grasp just how widespread they are. I mean, we're finding them in food, water, the air we breathe. And this is the concerning part. Inside us, like studies are finding them in the placenta, different organs, even just circulating in our blood. And initially, a lot of the worry was around inflammation, and how they might mess with our hormones, which are so sensitive.
Yeah, no one wants to hear that their hormones are messed up. But now we're zeroing in on this whole water bottle thing. So what's the deal there? What's the research saying?
Well, preliminary findings show that, yep, our everyday water bottles could be a big source of microplastic exposure. Essentially, they can leach these tiny plastic particles into the water we're drinking. And this is where it gets even more interesting. You know how we're talking about microplastics being everywhere? Well, get this, they're showing up even in glass containers. So it seems like it might be bigger than just plastic bottles themselves. It's a much broader environmental contamination issue.
Oh, wow. Even glass. That's a bit of a surprise, honestly.
Yeah.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this blood pressure connection. There was a study done on this, right? Can you walk us through it? What exactly did they do?
Absolutely. So they take 8 healthy adults and basically said, all right, for the next month, no more drinks from plastic bottles, only tap water for you. And they tracked their blood pressure throughout at the start after 2 weeks and then again at the end of the 4 weeks.
Okay, and what did they find? Did everyone's blood pressure change?
Well, the most notable change was in the women. Their diastolic blood pressure, that's a bottom number in a reading, went down noticeably, which is pretty significant when you think about it. A simple change and a potentially huge impact for a lot of folks out there. Now, the men in the study, their blood pressure didn't really change much.
Huh. That's interesting that there was a difference between men and women in the results. Do we know why that might be? Did the study say?
They did acknowledge the small sample size, especially when it comes to the guys. I mean, there were only 3 men in the study, so it's tough to draw any solid conclusions about how this specifically affects men. But overall, the trend they saw suggested that cutting back on plastic could be good for heart health. Less plastic, maybe fewer particles in our blood, maybe less risk of problems down the line. Their thinking was that the plastic particles in our blood could actually be contributing to higher blood pressure.
Gotcha. So even though this study was small, it's still suggesting that we should think twice before reaching for that plastic water bottle, huh?
Exactly. In fact, they were pretty straightforward about it. They basically said, based on what we've seen, avoid beverages packaged in plastic bottles. They believe that by cutting down on how much of this plastic we're taking in, we might be able to lower our risk of heart issues. They flat out said plastic particles present in the bloodstream could contribute to increased blood pressure.
All right, so let's zoom out for a second. For our listeners, why does this matter? Why should they care about this?
Well, think about it this way. High blood pressure, also known as hypertension, that's one of the biggest risk factors for serious heart problems down the road. And what this research is suggesting is that something as simple as choosing not to drink from plastic bottles could be a way to manage that risk, something we can control. Of course, more research is needed to really nail down exactly how microplastics are impacting our blood pressure. I mean, being able to actually measure the amount of microplastics in the blood would give us a much clearer picture.
All right, we always need more data, don't we? But thinking beyond blood pressure for a sec, Aren't there other potential health issues linked to all this? I feel like I remember reading about a few other concerns.
You're right. When you look at the research as a whole, there are some other red flags popping up related to microplastics. We're talking about potential issues with inflammation in the body, possible disruptions to the endocrine system, which controls our hormones. And there's concern about something called oxidative stress, which happens at the cellular level. All of these things can have pretty serious consequences for our health.
So, all right, for everyone listening, what can we do with this information? I mean, it can feel kind of overwhelming when you start thinking about all the plastic around us.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It can feel like a lot. But here's the simplest and most effective thing you can do right now. Cut back on drinks from plastic bottles. That's a huge one. Instead, opt for tap water whenever possible and use reusable containers like glass or stainless steel. That's a tangible way to reduce your exposure. It's important to keep in mind that even though this is a good step, we still need more research to really understand the long-term effects of microplastics.
It is kind of a wake-up call, though, isn't it? It really brings home how much plastic is around us and how it's not just an environmental problem anymore. It's impacting our own bodies, too.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, these microplastics are literally everywhere now. They've found their way into our environment and into us. And, making that personal choice to use less single-use plastic, it's a win-win. It's potentially better for our health and for the planet. And hey, if you're interested in learning more about that specific study we talked about, you can find it in the journal Microplastics.
So the big takeaway for everyone today. Emerging evidence suggests that regularly drinking from those plastic bottles could be linked to higher blood pressure. Plus, there's the added worry about all those microplastics and their potential health effects overall. And while we always need more research to confirm all this, it might be a good idea to start making some changes in our daily routines, right?
Absolutely. And this whole thing really makes you think, doesn't it? If these tiny particles can get into our bodies and potentially cause these issues, what other everyday things are we doing? Things that seem totally harmless that might actually be affecting our health in the long run? That's something worth pondering.